My Playful Wife, Episode 19, What Piyush Built, written by Mia. Bengaluru in June was a different city from the one we had visited in February. Hotter, the famous greenery visibly under pressure, the air dense and close in a way that Delhi's dry, violent summer does not prepare you for. Delhi heat is a furnace. It bakes you clean. Bengaluru heat that June was a hell breath, humid and patient, the pre-monsoon wait of a city waiting for rain that would not quite come. You sweated differently there. You moved more slowly. The whole place seemed to be conserving itself. Piyush's flat felt different too, and the difference told a story before anyone said a word. Mira had moved in, not announced as such. There had been no formal sentence, no "we've decided," at least none that had reached us, but present in the full and unmistakable sense, the sense you cannot fake or hide. Her books had migrated onto his shelves and been interleaved with his, which is a more intimate act than it sounds. You do not interleave your books with someone unless you have stopped imagining ever having to separate them again. Her plants stood along the windowsill, 3 of them, tended, thriving, the particular evidence of a person who intends to be somewhere long enough for things to grow. There was a second toothbrush in the obvious way and 100 less obvious ways, the reorganization of a shared space that happens gradually and then all at once, when one person stops being a guest in it and starts being part of its structure. The flat had been Piyush's, furnished with his careful bachelor efficiency. It was theirs now. You could feel the grammar of it had changed from singular to plural. I walked through it slowly. The first evening, while Saloni and Mira were occupied in the kitchen, and I felt a thing I had not expected to feel in my younger brother's flat, a kind of awe. He had built this, out of the wreckage of the year, and it had been wreckage, for him too, in its way. I had been so occupied with my own that I had sometimes forgotten his. He had gone to a strange city alone and built, from nothing, a whole life. A job he was good at, a flat with good light, a woman whose plants were thriving on his windowsill, the boy who cried at cartoons, who had a cat in his hostel room, who had caused, however unmeaningly, the largest rupture of my adult life, had taken himself off to the south and made something real and good and durable. I stood in the middle of it and was, simply, proud of him. It surprised me, the pride. It had no complication in it at all. We had arrived 2 days before the dinner, and those 2 ordinary days were, in their way, more revealing than the event itself. I watched what Piyush had built by watching how the 4 of us lived inside it. In the mornings he made coffee. He had become, in Bengaluru, a person with opinions about coffee, which would have been unthinkable in the brother I grew up with, a Nagpur boy raised on overboiled chai, and he made it carefully, in a contraption Mira had taught him, and brought it to us with the shy pride of a man showing you a small competence he has earned. I watched him in his own kitchen. I watched him know where things were, reach for them without looking, move through the rooms with the unconscious authority of a person at home in a life he had made rather than inherited. There is a particular way a man stands in a kitchen that is his, that he chose, that he pays for, that he shares with a woman who chose him back. Piyush stood that way now. The boy who had once needed me to fix everything, who had called me at midnight from a hostel about a failed exam, a lost wallet, a girl, stood in his own kitchen in his own city, fixing his own life, and had been doing it for over a year without calling me about any of it. He had stopped needing me to fix things. It is one of the strangest griefs of an older brother, that moment, and one of the proudest. On the second afternoon, Saloni and Mira spread out across the living room floor with Saloni's sketchbook between them. Mira, it turned out, had a good eye, not a maker's eye, but a reader's, the engineer's ability to see where a structure will fail before it fails, and Saloni had begun, over the months of phone calls, to use her as a sounding board for the second collection. I sat in the corner with a book I wasn't reading and listened to the two of them work through a piece. Saloni describing, Mira questioning. The design getting better in the air between them. My wife and my brother's wife-to-be on the floor of the flat my brother built, making something better together. I had a notebook thought I didn't write down because writing it down would have meant getting up and breaking the thing. That this exact tableau was the answer to every fear I'd carried a year before. That the worst thing that ever happened to me had somehow delivered me here, to a corner of a Bengaluru living room, watching the people I'd been most afraid of losing build things on the floor. Piyush came and sat beside me. He looked at the two women, then at me. "It's good, Na," he said finally. Quiet. Just for me. "It's good," I said. He took me out that evening, before Mira got home. "Men's work," he said, grinning, which meant he wanted to buy things for the dinner and wanted company. We walked to a market near his flat. At the flower stall, he agonized, between two kinds of roses, holding them up in the failing light, and I realized he was nervous. That this man who had built a whole life was nervous about whether his fiancée's mother would like the right flowers, and I felt a rush of tenderness for him so sudden it embarrassed me. "That one," I said, to end his suffering. "The lighter one. Mother's like the lighter one." He didn't ask how I knew. He bought the lighter one. It is a small thing to be able to do for your brother, to choose his roses, and it is also, I have come to think, most of what brotherhood is once the big things are done. The choosing of roses, the standing beside, the carrying of half the bags. On the walk back, both our hands full of his careful purchases, flowers for the mother, a sweet he'd been told the father liked. He said, not looking at me, "I was so scared you wouldn't come. To this. I told Mira you would, and the whole time I wasn't sure." "I came," I said. "I'll always come now. That's settled. You don't have to be scared of that one anymore." He nodded, fast, and busied himself with the sweets, and I looked away at a stall of plastic buckets to give him the second he needed. We carried the flowers and the sweets back to the flat he had built in the city he had chosen, and I thought, this is what he built. Not the flat, not the job, not even Mira, exactly. He built a place where his older brother could walk beside him carrying somebody's father's favorite sweet and feel nothing but glad. He built his way back to me. That was the construction. The rest was just where it happened. The engagement dinner was at a restaurant Mira had chosen, her city, her ground, the symbolism of it not lost on me. A quiet place in Indiranagar, good food, low light, no performance about it. Mira was not a woman who needed a room to perform. She had chosen a place that let the evening be the evening. Her parents had come up from Mysore, small, warm people, her mother quick and bird-like and watchful in the way Mira was watchful, so that you could see exactly where the noticing had come from. Her father quiet, courteous, given to long considering pauses before he spoke, after which the thing he said was usually worth the wait. Her younger sister was there too, 19 or 20, with the fierce protective skepticism of a younger sibling examining the person who proposes to take her older sister away. I watched the sister all evening, half covertly, because her arc was the most interesting thing in the room to me. She had arrived, I could tell, prepared to disapprove, the default position of a loving younger sister, and across the length of the dinner, I watched her not disapprove. I watched her watch Piyush be kind to her mother, be easy with her father, be helplessly fond of Mira in the way he could not hide and did not try to, and I watched the skepticism in her face soften, degree by degree, into something that by the end of the evening was a provisional, guarded, real yes. It is a good sign when the protective younger sister comes around. It means the thing is sound. My parents were not there. This requires saying plainly, because it sat under the evening like a stone under shallow water. They had wanted the wedding, not the engagement dinner. There had been a call and adjustments and the long, delicate negotiation that families conduct in the spaces around an event. The negotiation about who is owed what and who will travel when and whose feelings are being managed by whose absence. My mother had her reasons, some of them about distance and her knees and the expense of 2 trips, and some of them about other things she would never say, and I would never make her say. I had spoken to her the week before, on the phone, and the conversation had been full of the things she did not ask. And Saloni as well? And the 2 of you are, everything is. The sentences trailing off into the places she would not go.
She knew something.
Mothers always know something. They know it the way you know weather is coming, in the joints, without evidence. She did not know what, and she would not ask, and I would not tell her. And we conducted the whole call in that careful weather of the unasked, and at the end she said, "You sound well, Beta. You sound settled." And there was a question folded inside the observation, and I said, "I am, Ma. I'm well. We're well." And let that be the answer to the question she hadn't quite asked. Saloni handled the dinner the way Saloni handles everything that matters, with complete competence and the specific, deliberate warmth of a woman who has decided to be entirely present. She sat herself next to Mira's mother, chose the seat, I noticed. She does not leave such things to chance, and within 20 minutes had the small bird-like woman laughing, really laughing, a hand to her mouth, charmed past her own caution. She spoke about Piyush with the ease of a person who knew him well and thought well of him, which was entirely true. Whatever else was also true, and her warmth for him was real in a way that I watched Mira notice from across the table and visibly relax into. Because Mira, of all people, would have been alert to it, would have been watching, with her noticing eyes, for any false note in the warmth of this sister-in-law toward the man she was marrying, any hairline crack of complication. There was none to find. Saloni's gladness for my brother was, by that June, entirely uncomplicated. Whatever else she felt, she had carried off somewhere private and set down, and what she brought to that table was clean. I watched Mira find nothing to worry about and put her worry down, and I thought, that is a gift my wife is giving her, deliberately, the gift of an untroubled evening, and Mira is wise enough to know it is a gift. After dinner, I went outside to stand on the street for a moment, the way you do, to let a full evening settle. The Inderoniger night was warm and busy, scooters and dogs and the lit fronts of other restaurants, the held-breath air still waiting for its rain. Piyush came out and found me. "Bia," he said. "It was a good evening," I said. "Yes." He stood beside me, the 2 of us looking at the street rather than at each other, which is the only way brothers can say certain things. He was quiet for a moment, and then he started a sentence he couldn't finish. "She's," he stopped, tried again and got further. "I didn't know it could be like this. Bia, I didn't know. What she is. What we are when I keep waiting to understand it, and instead I just keep being in it. Is that normal? That you don't understand it. You just live in it." "That's normal," I said. "You don't understand it. You don't get to. You just get to be in it. The understanding comes later, in pieces, years later, and even then only some of it." "Is that how it was?" he said. "With you and Saloni? At the start?" I thought about the start. The real start, not the wedding, which had been a settled, comfortable arrangement between 2 people who liked each other, but the other start, the one in the kitchen a year and a half ago, the balcony with the watering can in my hands, and the morning rearranging itself around what I had just understood. The start of actually being married, which had come, in our case, absurdly late and at terrible cost, years after the wedding. Yes, I said, differently, by a different road than yours.
But yes.
There was a time I didn't understand any of it and just had to live inside it and trust that the understanding would come.
Some of it has.
Most of it hasn't. I've made my peace with living inside the part one don't understand. He was quiet, taking that in. I'm glad you're here, he said. For this. That we could. He gestured, vaguely, at the air, at the restaurant behind us where his fiancée sat with my wife, at all of it, the whole improbable assembled shape of where we had arrived. He didn't have the words either. We are not, in my family, a people with the words. That we could just have a dinner. That my brother could come to my engagement and it could be good.
Easy.
I didn't think we'd get here. There was a stretch I was sure we'd lost it, you and me. That whatever happened had broken it past fixing. I know, I said. I thought so too for a while. What changed? He said. I considered the honest answer. I decided I'd rather have a brother than be right, I said. That was most of it. It turned out not to be a close decision once I actually looked at it. Being right is very cold. I'd had enough of being cold. He turned and looked at me then, and his young face in the restaurant light was doing something it was struggling to hold, and I looked back at the street to give him the unwatched second, the way Mira had taught me, the way Mira gave it to Saloni across a dinner table months before. We are all of us, all the time, giving each other unwatched seconds. It is most of what love is, when you strip it down, the willingness to look away at the right moment. Through the restaurant window, I could see the two women, Saloni and Mira, sitting close now that the parents had moved off, their heads angled toward each other, deep in something that was theirs and private and complete. Whatever they were saying, it did not need us. It was its own conversation, the one between the two women who anchored the four of us, and I was glad it existed, glad my wife and my brother's wife-to-be had found in each other a thing that was wholly their own. I put my hand on my brother's shoulder.
She's the right one, I said.
You know that. The sister came around. The mother's already in love with her own daughter's husband. Mira looks at you like you're the answer to a question she'd given up asking. She's the right one. Yes, he said. His voice was not quite steady. I know. We stood there a while longer on the warm street, two brothers, not talking now, the talking done, just standing in the night outside the place where the women we loved were sitting with their heads together, and the city held its breath around us, waiting for the rain that would come, eventually, the way it always does, the way everything does, in its own time, when the weight of the waiting finally tips over into the thing itself. Saloni found us there a few minutes later, come out to see where we had gone, and stood on my other side, and the three of us looked at the warm waiting street, and she put her arm through mine the way she had after the show. None of us said anything. And then the first fat drop of the season's rain landed on the pavement at our feet, dark as a dropped coin, and then another, and then it came. To be continued in episode 20, The Monsoon.
Simbolo di copyright Mia.
All rights reserved. That was episode 19 of My Playful Wife. If this story is staying with you, the next episode is already waiting. Subscribe so you don't miss it. The complete book is on Amazon, and early episodes plus bonus chapters are on my Patreon. Links are in the description.
Mia.
Thank you for listening.